Welcome to the Red Gauge Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Kyle. This is Josh. Please like, comment, subscribe, share. Helps out the show a ton. Today we're joined by Dr. Dave Osborn, Doctor of Leadership and Health and Human Performance, Doctor of Strength if you're in the powerlifting world.
You know, doctor of some heavy ass lifts.
Doctor of some heavy
That's what
ass
you should
lifts.
introduce yourself.
Yeah. We should have before. Yeah, I mean that's gonna be my first question. We're gonna circle back to that right away. He's over 2,000 pound total, 749 squat and sleeves, 529 bench, 727.5 deadlift. Founder of Osborn Performance Systems, which is online coaching and a gym. And we're real excited to have him here. He was recommended by Logan because he worked with Logan for a while, and so I'm real excited to have you on.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah. Okay, so the first question, we got to circle back right away.
All right.
How much do you have to deadlift to get a doctorate in strength, you know?
Yeah. I remember like early on in like my collegiate career, right? And it was during my bachelor's, one of my study projects was, can you do a double bodyweight deadlift in 12 weeks? How would you set it up? What would the diet look like and nutrition protocol and everything? And what would the training look like? And I remember at the time I could pull like 405, right? And I weighed probably 240. Mm-hmm. And so over that 12-week period, I ended up dropping 20 pounds and then increasing that pull to a 485. So I ended up hitting like the double body weight and dropping a little weight too. And then from there, deadlift really took a long freaking time to like get better. And by the time I was doing my doctoral thesis, I could pull 727. Yeah. So from like bachelor's to my doctoral thesis, so like another 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Time. I know. Is it what's his name? Kaler Woolham?
Oh, Kaler. Yeah.
Kaler Woolham. He's got his Instagram handles Dr. Deadlift, and I don't think he has a PhD, but nobody's going to argue with him, you know?
I wouldn't argue with him either on deadlift. That guy's got it down. I'm always like kind of bitter about deadlift because like you start, right, and deadlift's the first lift you can really put some weight on.
Yeah.
And you're all jazzed up about it, and it's your favorite lift. And then it kind of starts to stall and plateau a bit. And then bench and squat are going great. And deadlift still kind of is just eking up. And I remember for forever, my narrative to myself was, you're a better deadlifter than squatter and bencher. That's still your lift.
Yeah. And
then my squat started like consistently beating out my deadlift on heavy training weeks. And it took a while to come to terms that, okay, well, when you're a super heavyweight, it's okay. It's okay if that squat, gets a little bit higher than the deadlift. That's not your fault. That's just your big, thick torso.
Yeah.
It's just hard to get down in there, right? But, and I remember too, like my best triple was a 705 and thinking like, okay, you're a mid 700, high 700 deadlifter. You're pulling a 705 triple. And then just like the hook grip, slip of doom would kick in. Yep. I've dropped 700 probably just as many times as I've attempted 700 plus. Right. But like, it's something cool where even now, and I'm 37, coming up on 37, it's still a lift where I'm discovering new things and still like improving technically with like even after a decade plus of working on it. And I don't hate it as much anymore. And it feels like it's starting to click over again. And maybe this is the time.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, because being a high school strength coach, obviously I get kids when they're really fresh, and like that's deadlift is the thing that you could do untrained. Like if you have some strength, your deadlift sometimes is like way out in front, right?
Oh yeah.
My super far.
My first deadlift was 425 pounds, and that was not coming close to that on a squat.
Right. Like then if you see like if you then go look at like elite level, like there's lots of guys, very strong guys that out squat their deadlifts or that like you actually might be one of the most balanced power lifters I've ever seen. Like that is a very balanced culture.
I take a lot lot of pride in that too, and like being pretty dang decent at all three, and having a good, number for all three of them. That's pretty competitive.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm pretty balanced at the fact that I'm just not good at it. Any of the three, like the 2000 and being super balanced. That's
I think
impressive.
That's maybe a conversation that's worth bringing up. Is Josh jokes a lot on here that he's not very strong, but he has benched 315 and deadlift 500, and like
I'm strong
for a human
population.
Yeah.
Yes, population wise, like I'm strong.
And I always love that about powerlifting too, because every powerlifter does it, right? As they're comparing themselves to John Hack, right, or Christy Hawkins, or Russell Orhe, or Jesus, right, or Agatha, right, and there's all these amazing lifters at the very, very top, and that's something a lot of lifters don't realize too. Is like when you get an elite total, and you're in the top 2.5%. That gap at the top 2.5 is huge.
Yeah.
It's almost like once you hit elite, like, okay, now the game starts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like the catch up to those real top 10 positions is the remainder of your time and journey.
Yeah. We've joked with kids with Kyle. Like, so Kyle is, for most of the kids that are around, the strongest person that they're going to meet. And Kyle's a very strong guy. But if we took him, we always joke, like, what's your best bench? Like,
yeah. So, like, I did 460. I was stronger when I did 335 for 18 before I tore my bicep tendon. So, like, but flirting with 500, right?
Right.
So
like, a near 500-pound bencher. But if we took him to the world bench press champions,
and
like,
they had to compete with Julius,
we had to be so embarrassed.
I just won't even look like I belong. They won't let me on the platform. They're like, well, the opening weight's 650.
Like,
so.
Who are you coaching? Like, you're a competitor. Oh, my God.
Like sneaking a little slingshot under your shirt and everything.
Do the
roll up towel.
Yeah.
But strength is just so relative, man.
Yeah.
And it's
very much so
why you just got to focus. You got to focus on yourself.
Yeah. You got to just focus on the process, right? You got to love the process and engage in it and everything.
I always say, like, I kind of get bummed when I'm prepping for a meet and competing. Right. It's because like the next 16, 12 weeks is very structured, very laid out. There's not going to be a lot of deviating from it to do like shenanigans and fun stuff. And so I always have a much more enjoyable time just training compared to like prepping for a meet and then the cool down afterwards and feeling like you're not at your peak strength. Like, I hate that feeling afterwards.
In the last 10 years, I've done one meet, but I've had like 12 on the calendar because I like the training, and so I'll get up to where it's like time to get to a meet or something. I'm like, I'm just going to keep doing this volume block for a while.
Yeah, this block feels too good. I don't want to leave it.
Like you just, whenever you get something like that, I'm just ride it out. I'm taking it for everything I can.
Yep, I'm going to milk every last inch out of it, totally.
During that little talk, you said you're about to turn 37. So did you play for Wenatchee High School?
I did.
When did you graduate?
I played football until junior year.
Okay.
I really enjoyed wrestling.
Okay.
And so what was happening was, one, I don't like learning plays in football. There's just too much, right? Like there's too much stuff going on and I just want to hit the guy in front of me. But when you're playing offensive tackle, right, like you're responsible for a little bit more than just, the guy right in front of you. And so I was bitter about it when I was younger, but in my older age, I can reflect back and just think like, no, you were a turd and didn't learn plays. Yeah. That's why. So I was on varsity, right, and was ready to be the varsity offensive tackle. But then coach rightfully cut me to JV because I didn't know all the plays perfectly. So I ended up taking senior year off of football just to focus on being in shape for wrestling. I always found like right after football, it was just brutal getting in cardiorespiratory shape, right?
I mean, that's also just a long, football's all summer, right? So summer, fall.
It's a big time commitment. And especially at that point, I was really heavy into training myself. I was taking a course at our high school that prepped you for your ACE personal training certification. So I did that junior and senior year. And so I was spending a lot of time in gym, going through personal training stuff, got my trainer's license as a senior and was just doing more of that rather than football. And so I spent that summer prior senior year, all the fall and everything, just really prepping for a great wrestling season. And I did well, compared to the competition I had. I've been wrestling the state champion in 215s for 4A since like first grade. And so like the pecking order at the 215 weight class was kind of like established since we were like 10 years old. So I was number 4 in my bracket, and I did really well in our districts tournament, and like all that training paid off, and I was really happy with it. I scored the most points for our team my senior year, and just had a good experience, like just prepping for one thing rather than just spending time on a sport I didn't really enjoy, even though all my friends were doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So did you guys play against each other?
That's what I wonder how close. Yeah, because like I went all at least 3 of the years I was in high school, and I graduated. I'm probably one class. I was class of 06.
Okay, I was 07.
Yeah, so
we might have on like junior year.
I played D line, so
yeah.
I wonder if we ran into each other. I do remember this great big fucking guy, maybe right tackle or something.
Yeah,
like a year or two older than you that played.
Oh, it's probably Jeff Kittner.
He was gigantic.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so are your high schoolers like big like that?
Not very often.
Well, not that big. We do have a couple of like large humans.
Sure.
But this is what I always say, like for whatever reason right now, like our really big guys are really, really nice.
Oh, that's good.
You know what I mean?
That's sweet.
Yeah, but like here's the thing, like you shouldn't. I don't have any daughters, so I'll say this. Like there's a lot of my O linemen that I'm like, I wouldn't mind if my daughter dated you. Like that's how nice they are.
Totally.
It's really cool because they're going to be like really awesome young men.
Absolutely.
And when you're like the coach, and you're like I need some
goddamn. You just be a dick a little bit.
Yes, right. Like, so
my training partner in high school for track played a little football. He went to North Carolina for track and field. I think he went to the Olympic trials at one point. He was a monster. And he quit football after his sophomore year because he didn't like hurting people.
Yeah.
It was like, I just don't want anybody to get hurt. I don't like it.
Overall, though, no, I would say that for the most part, we're very undersized.
Yeah.
In comparison to some of the other schools.
I really can't remember. Like, we'll still get some tall kids here and there, but not tall and large and big like I remember high schoolers being when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe that's a little bit like, you go back to your elementary school and you're like, this playground's a postage stamp, you know what I mean? Like, maybe it's just you grew up and less
Maybe, I don't know, like in 5th grade, I was already 190 pounds and like 5'10".
Giant.
And so I feel like I was pretty similar in size through elementary school to where I am now, but it definitely, my son was doing a presentation at the high school the other day. He's 11. And so they had the elementary school kids up there presenting. And I remember walking in the high school and it did feel smaller. It didn't feel like as big and spacious as I remember it being.
Yeah. There's some really, this is a funny aside, but there's some really interesting research where they try to like trick people into thinking they're bigger or smaller than they are. And they can trick people into thinking that they're about 8 inches tall or about 20 feet tall. But there seems to be a limit on how big a person will perceive themselves to be, which I always thought was really interesting.
Just by surroundings?
I don't remember the details of the study. It's been too long since I read it. That was an old study, but it was just a funny thing,
I feel like my kitchen makes me feel like that.
Yeah.
It's like, like putting a life-size Barbie inside of a tiny Barbie house. That's how I feel.
We have a weird number of similarities right now. Like you were talking about being 5'10" in 5th grade. I hit 6 feet tall in 5th grade.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Now
I look like the teacher in my class picture.
I would pick up my teacher and like carry her around. I was a jerk.
Yeah.
Did you have friends that start out a little bit shorter and then you hit full height and then they just kept going?
Yeah, I had out of our little friend group, I was always the tall one, and then we got together like a year out of high school, and almost all of them were taller than me, and it was weird. Like a couple of them didn't really grow until after high school, and then all of a sudden we got together, and I'm like, what happened? Like I turned into the short kid. But yeah, that definitely happened. Yeah. And then also when we bought our home, the kitchen in it, the ceiling in the kitchen, they had done the craziest remodel thing where they'd added onto the house, and instead of removing the old eave, they just put the kitchen ceiling in below that. So if I stood up straight, my head would rub on the ceiling. And you know, it's just the dumbest thing. So it's just funny, like you're talking about, like I was a giant fifth grader. I was like, I was a giant fifth grader, and you're like, I feel like a giant in my kitchen. I was like, I feel like a giant in my kitchen. Yeah, we just became best friends.
Did we just become best friends? Good old shared common experiences.
Yeah.
So, I derailed that. My belt, man. You guys rolled with it, but
what are you gonna do?
Yeah,
what are you gonna do?
I like that camp though. I like the campus, Wenatchee. Like I like the town. You know, there's some spots that are a little frightening for a small town guy like me, but.
Oh, you mean South Wenatchee?
Yeah.
Too big.
That's where my gym is.
Okay.
Because yes, it's frightening, but real estate prices are
perfect.
Primo.
Yeah. So we went over there and we had all the kids. Right, we're all in a hotel, and it's like, okay, like drew a map. Like you guys are allowed to go down this street here. These businesses, like don't cross that. Right.
Yeah.
We were down by the train tracks by the river.
Yep. Yeah. Your southern boundary. Yeah. You don't need to go past that.
All right. So how did you, like you mentioned already that you trained hard for that senior year for wrestling. How did you get into the weight room? When did you start training?
That's a great question. My dad kind of recognized really early on. I'm the oldest. My middle two brothers were both really high level soccer players. And coaches. And so growing up, they, were in soccer year round. I liked more like, just one season at a time, one sport at a time. I didn't want to do travel sports or anything like that. And so my dad, when I was 10 years old, probably not, 9, 10 years old, brought me to our local racket athletic club. And my brothers would go play racquetball or squash. And I would go into the little weight room area and just do a couple sets on every single machine and just run circuits in there. And I really enjoyed straining and grinding, right? And really pushing my body in that way. And it was something where I immediately felt powerful. Whereas like in sport, I was a big kid and I had decent endurance, but I wasn't going to be super fast. Or anything like that. And I don't have a large amount of fast twitch fibers. I do really well at like muscular endurance tests, like 225 bench tests, things like that. And so like for me, getting outside of like power sports and just being able to train in a weight room, kind of like my own style and my own speed was really freeing for me and something that brought a ton of enjoyment. And I remember one of my first lessons of how like a machine bench press isn't the same as an actual bench press. And thinking like, okay, I've got like 200 pounds on the machine, no problem. Let's go to my buddy's little shack and grab that Sears weight with like 95 pounds on the bench. Immediately just guillotine myself to have him pull it up off of me. And like, oh, okay, so like training for what you want to do is probably a good idea. Having a little specificity there. I learned that real quick.
Yeah, machines can also be real deceptive, right? They can be a lot more or a lot less than you think they are.
Sure. Yeah, depending on the angle, right, and the mechanical load where it's distributed, for sure.
Yeah. That's I kind of had the same. I know you said you loved the strain, and I remember, like, I felt like my whole life growing up, people were always telling me that I had to calm down and be more gentle with stuff, and that I got to go in the weight room and I was like, you mean I can just go as hard as I want to? Nobody's going to stop me? Like I can just, you know.
Now everybody's sitting around encouraging you to to do it.
Yeah, it became a good thing. Well, I mean, like now I'm 40 and I just tore something in my hand and people are like, maybe you should take it easy. And I'm like, you guys are all high. I'm going to keep going.
You can't just tell me to get after it for 20 plus years and all of a sudden I'm going to take it easy.
With Kyle's hand, this has nothing to do with anything, but he was doodling the other day. We were at a meeting and he was tracing his hand, and then he got to I looked over and his middle finger on the tracing is like twice as wide. I was like, what the hell is that? Like, he's like, oh, I hurt my finger.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus Christ, man.
He'll be fine. Everything.
Yeah, big old swollen turkey finger up there.
Yeah. So you like discovered it through dad's encouragement and everything. When you got to high school, was it like full steam all the way?
Yeah, with high school, and it kind of comes back to like why I eventually started my own gym. With high school, we never had like an actual like strength and conditioning coach. We would have like the football coach show us like the shadiest cleans in the entire world, and no one knew anything about technique or anything like that. It was like right when like Bigger, Faster, Stronger was coming out in terms of programming. So like, ooh, computer prints you out a little spreadsheet and you got your 5x5 power cleans and all this. And so like you try and follow it, but it's a mess, right? You don't know what you're doing. My hamstrings were always so tight because I sat a lot. I was a big kid. I couldn't really squat. And even like doing like walking lunges for football and stuff like that, immediately strain a hamstring, right? And was just overly tight. And so really all I would do is like the sevens on bench press where you get all the fives on there and you do 7 reps, take the fives off, build it up, take them all off, go back up, dumbbell bench and trap bar deadlift. And then like, some bent over rows, lat pull downs, still sticking on the machines. So like high school wasn't super formalized in any way. It was kind of just like find a workout you found from a magazine or talk to a buddy about, right? And just do your best. And so looking back, I really during my bachelor's, I kind of recognized that like that was something missing from my town was like some really good strength and conditioning. And I saw an opportunity for that when I was able to move back. And so kind of like my entire high school experience with weight room and strength conditioning was really just kind of self-taught and self-experimenting. And I always wish we had something more formal. Like, I get kids now and the things they know after a year beats the things I learned, over 6 years, by myself. And so that was a really big motivator for when I moved back and starting my gym, was be able to provide that.
Yeah, it is interesting that, in the 90s and 2000s, or maybe the late 90s and early 2000s, like getting information, the internet existed, but getting information was hard, like especially anything that was any good,
And if you didn't know anyone, like I didn't even know powerlifting existed until 2011, 2012.
Right.
And so if you didn't know anyone in it, all you really knew was bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to take like, I loved HIIT training, loved HIIT training. Like, oh, I just work up to a top set, do as many reps as I can, move on. This is amazing, right? And so it wasn't until college where I found like Elite FTS and T Nation and everything, where I found powerlifting and like higher levels of structured periodization for training, that my strength and like training ability really started to take off.
Yeah. What was I just going to ask? I had a good question.
That would be a really crazy thing for me to do.
Such a long day today. I'm losing my.
I was just like,
oh yeah, I got you. I remember. Okay, so there's a few lessons I learned in my early strength training career that I wish I hadn't learned. Like, if it's more than 5 reps, it's cardio. Like I hadn't learned that lesson, because it's not a real thing. But was there anything that you learned that that like was kind of like a formative piece of how you thought about training that later on you're like, ooh, this wasn't such a great idea, or even like very later on, like just like in the last 2 years where you're like, I've been doing this the whole time, it's dumb.
I remember, so before I got to college, I was in the Marine Corps, and I'd be doing like deployment training. And I remember, it was still like heavily influenced by HIIT training.
Right.
And just kind of like doing one all out set, moving on, changing the stimulus kind of thing, rather than like repeated effort. And I remember I would run a mile, go do a max set of bench reps at like 185, go run a mile, and then go do, a variation like close grip or overhead pressing, and then go run a mile. And then I go do my dumbbell bench, run a mile, go do some, cable push downs, and I would just run a mile in between every single one of my exercises, and would just put together these insane training sessions. And I think the lesson overall that I finally learned was like, it's really easy to slay yourself. It's much harder to train yourself.
Yeah.
And it's always easier to do more, but it's so difficult to do less and say, I'm going to build off of this next time and delay that gratification. So that was definitely a lesson it took me a while to learn. Cause like, especially powerlifting, you know, T-Nation lead FTS. So the first thing I'm going to come across is conjugate. Right. And so like, oh, okay, well, I'll do some, and like you're in college, so max effort and dynamic effort. Well, dynamic effort doesn't really exist. So you're really just going to do max effort every week and maybe change up, you know, what the position is. Maybe I'm going to squat wide stance, right? And then maybe the next time I'm going to do a pause. But like it just turned into maxing. It's the same thing, not being able to delay gratification and like build week upon week upon week. And I definitely think that's something that informs how I coach now.
Yeah.
Is trying to string as many weeks of forward progression as I can. It's kind of like how, you know, with what Mike Tashir will talk about with like emergent strategies and rerunning cycles and like average time to peak, right? And just trying to see where your lifter, because everyone's going to be a little different, right? Some people can progress for 8 weeks, right? 8 weeks plus, no problem, before they need a deload. Other people are going to need, you know, 3, 4, 5 weeks and have to cycle back a little bit quicker. And so one of the things I always try and find with a lifter, you know, relatively quickly is like, okay, how long does it take them to really peak their strength? And then how far back do I have to recycle before I can start building them up again and surpass that previous expression of strength?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is a thing. We're very much like in the world of strength culture, especially if you're new to it, conditioned to think that like the 12-week transformation is a real thing. And it's not, right?
No, it's so little time.
Yeah.
It's so little time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at the point now where I plan all my training blocks in like 9-month increments, you know?
Yes.
Like they're not short, you know? And it is funny because when you fall in love with the process and you're doing stuff that works, it's pretty easy mentally to stick with it, you know, because you're like, hey, that, you know, you can see improvements in the process, even if you're not ever, you know, like if you're only maxing out once every 18 months or whatever. But you know, it still is, you can still see that you're doing better.
And you learn like different things other than your 1 rep max that are indicators of progression, right? Like your 5 reps are going up, or, you know, you have a good variation that carries over to your main competition movement, and that's getting stronger, right? Like, or your bar speed's gone up, stuff like that. Like there's so many different variables you can measure besides 1 rep max to show while you're training, like, okay, I'm getting better. My progression's where it needs to be, and I'm building each week.
Yeah.
One thing you said in there that I really think is an interesting concept was like not having to grind every time you go to the gym, right? Like, so a lot of people, it's like a feeling you want to get walking out of the gym like, oh my God, I'm beat up. Like, to understand that there might be sometimes you walk out of the gym and feel fine.
Yeah.
Like that really was a really good gym day, right? Which Kyle, I don't know if he ever does, but he just grinds himself to the ground all the time. But then like the same thing, like you grind yourself to the dirt, but you work out like 3 to 4 days a week.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
I plan for it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But some people don't plan for that. So they're going 5 to 6 days a week.
Yeah.
And they're grinding. Yeah. And then they're going to be like, dude, I don't know why I'm not getting stronger.
Well, and you can feel it.
How are you going to do more than what you already did? You just did the most.
Yeah, I mean, you can feel it if you're doing too much, right? Because you'll go in and you'll be like, hey, I did this, you know, whatever. I squatted 405 for 5, and it felt good. Like I felt strong. Like I had to try really hard, but like when I took the weight off, I was powerful, right? And then the next time you come in, you might be able to do 405 for 5 again, but you're like, oh, this hurts. Like I can't. Like,
it's so much harder.
Yeah. Like, why is it so much harder? You know, like your body will tell you. You know?
But even like if you're trying to like look, we talk about this all the time. Like you really got to figure out what works, and a coach should be like trying to figure out what works for you in the same time. Because like you could look at like, oh, I want to get bigger legs, and look at like Tom Platz, and he's like, I did 50 sets until my fucking skeleton jumped out of my body. You know what I mean? Like. And then, you know, somebody like Cutler might be like, oh, I did.
Cutler's like, I took 3 years off of legs.
Yeah, I did.
Too good at
I did 6 sets of squats.
Yeah.
And then I walked away. I was just like, what the fuck? pretty different advice right there. Both had pretty goddamn good results. You know what I mean? But one worked for one guy, one worked for the other guy. Like, you got to figure that out, which means you might need to try both.
Yeah.
You know, but
but then you have to build that into your training, right? Like, give it actual amount of time, like 6, 9 months, a year of actually legitimate trying to incorporate that. And then after that long, like, you're going to have a great idea of, okay, these are the strengths of training like that. And these are the drawbacks, you know, that you have to mitigate.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you start out with people, because it sounds kind of like, you know, you're, if I can find a tool that'll work, I'll use it, you know, kind of mind. But when you start out with people, do you have a tendency to favor, like, if you're, say we're going to do a meet block, right? 6 or 9 months to get ready for a meet. And are you somebody who favors, like, in that, like, a preparatory phase, doing, like, are you a volume guy? Are you a frequency guy? Are you an intensity guy, like, to default? Or do you usually, like, try to have the conversation with the athlete and see, like, what do you like doing and everything?
You know, it's funny because you talk about training Logan, right? And that was back in like 2019, right? Like six plus years ago. And I'd never trained anyone that strong before.
I mean, in all fairness, he became the second strongest guy on the planet at one point. So, like, it's,
and it was insane. And we're, you know, he had lifted in monoliths, and now this coming meet was going to be a walkout, right? And so we're trying to do all this incredibly challenging work for his squat, getting that walkout, you know, to the point where he could do over 900 pounds. And that was something I had screwed up on, was I was giving him too much. I'd never worked with someone that strong. And so it was routinely just like, all he could really do at that time was work up to a top set and then maybe a little accessory afterwards. But I had back off sets in there. I had variations after, then accessory work. Like, you know, it just ended up being too much, and we were dealing with little aggravation issues and stuff like that. He still did great at the meet. It was more like the drive from Arkansas to California that made things harder than anything else. But like, that was definitely something that I'm super thankful I got that experience with him. Pretty relatively early in my coaching career, was just getting to see the difference in recovery levels between, you know, beginners, your intermediates, and then your top level elites. It's a lot different. It's something, you know, that now when I take on new clients, part of my intake process is getting a good feel for what kind of training they're doing right now. And then looking, okay, can I add a little bit to that? Is it enough to get stronger? If not, maybe I can add a little bit. Or where does that focus need to be to get them, let's say we're in meet prep, right? Or beginning of meet prep. Do their lifts meet the standard, right? Can they squat to depth? Is the bar solid on their back? Can they hold a bench press pause for longer than a second? Right? And can they deadlift with good position, not sitting too far behind the bar, right? Like, just getting their general competency up. I think I try to use quite a bit of, not necessarily volume in terms of like 5x10s, right? But looking for as much volume and skill acquisition as I can get. And then as that skill acquisition really starts to improve and their mechanical efficiency starts getting higher, then I'll start ticking up the volume. Because once they're mechanically efficient, that volume's not going to beat them up the same as it would when they were, you know, a little bit rawer with their skill acquisition and they're a little shaky under the bar and stuff like that. Like, I can get a lot out of that just by giving a little bit more volume once that mechanical efficiency is kind of improved. And then from there, you know, I can look at how many weeks or months we have left till prep and get into our normal 12 weeks out kind of structure.
Yeah.
It's also interesting to think of how many exercises you might regularly plan.
Yes.
Somebody that just don't work anymore, like a Nordic curl. Right, like if you're deadlifting 1,000 pounds, probably doesn't do shit anymore. Right, like a Bulgarian split squat might be great for someone like me. Like, I might not only get like the stabilization, but like I probably still get some strength gains out of that. Like, you're not loading a fucking Bulgarian split squat to any level to actually get strength gains at that level. So it's like you almost start like eliminating shit. Like, oh my God, what the hell are we gonna do? Like, none of these fucking exercises can even make this kid stronger. Like, so you just wind up just doing, you know, the heavy stuff.
Finding a way to like load or change the mechanical leverage on accessories, it can be really tricky for sure. I always think like a great coach has awesome progressions and regressions for every exercise. So like, let's say it comes to the split squat. Yeah, doing split squats, with some dumbbells probably isn't going to be super overloading, or strength gaining for 1,000-pound squatter, but getting the unilateral work in and the balance and getting their hips stronger and their glutes stronger, right, are still things we need to achieve. And so, okay, well, maybe I give them a tempo, or maybe I give them a certain rep count to get under with a certain time limit. Or maybe if we do want to load it, and maybe it's a deload week or a pivot week, maybe we turn those split squats into Hatfield split squats, right? And now all of a sudden you got 400, 500 pounds on your back doing your split squats with that, and you might be able to get an actual strength stimulus out of it. And again, it's what the lifter can handle and stuff like that. But I always love that part of the challenge of just like, okay, you're a stallion. I see it. I see it. How are we gonna load you up? How are we gonna make this horse strong?
Yeah. Yeah, it is such an interesting thing because I noticed. So I got into training for track and field. And I ended up having a herniated disc, and it was kind of the end of my sport career, but I still wanted to train because I love training. And I remember when I finally got to the point where I could do some leg work, I went in and I couldn't squat, and I couldn't front squat, and I couldn't deadlift, and I was just real limited on what I could do, but I could do a single leg press. So I was like,
oh yeah,
I'll do a single leg press. And I could legitimately, like, it's on a 45, right? So, like, you got to cut the amount of weight in half. I would put 4 more plates on for my right leg than for my left. I could bench press.
Oh, wow.
My right leg was legitimately 100 pounds stronger than my left leg. And I was like, how did that happen? No wonder I messed up my back, like,
right.
How much more asymmetrical could you be?
Did that deficit end up catching up ever, or?
Yeah. So I just made the workouts around what my left leg could do, and eventually it caught up, so it was fine. But it's something I have to be really mindful about myself. Like, I don't know why it is that I have really strong like biases for some muscle groups, and it shows up in weird spots around my body. And if I don't do
totally
stuff, then I'll end up like really out of whack. And I thought that was an interesting thing,
Yeah, which is not uncommon for people, especially if you have little tweaks and things like that. But just having a more powerful side, I think that people see it more on the upper body movements, right? Because we all do bicep curls and stuff, or we do a bench, and a coach can really easily see like this happen.
Yeah. You got one elbow in and one elbow out.
Right. So, but like I see it a lot when I'm training the kids on plyometrics. And then all of a sudden, one-legged jumps, and they look like freaking the Harlem Globetrotters off their right leg, and then it looks like they're fucking gonna trip.
The Washington Generals on their left.
On the left,
trip over a pack of smokes.
All right. So, do you have you mentioned taking a stab at conjugate training when you were younger. Do you have a periodization method that's kind of like your go-to, or a version of a common model that you prefer?
Yeah, I would call it like almost again, like good periodization uses everything, right? There's linear elements, there's undulating elements, there's block elements. I would say I tend to do a conjugated block, or elements of undulating periodization throughout the week, where you're going to have a heavy exposure and then either a repetition exposure or an exposure based on velocity, or something a little bit more challenging that's not as heavy for a second exposure in a lift during a week. I tried to provide multiple lift frequency opportunities throughout the week for my lifters, if they can. I do find like that especially kind of falls down to the individual. I have college kids that can train 5-6 days a week, no problem. Or I have, average Joes, just a recreational hobbyist lifter that works long hours at, their job and can only do 2 or 3 days a week. And so just trying to figure out what's going to be the proper load for that individual kind of dictates things. But if I can get multiple exposures throughout a week, that's kind of my go-to, where one can be a little bit heavier and the other one can be for repetitions or position work, things like that, and just try and provide those opportunities for lifters.
Do you do a lot of exercise variety like people would traditionally think about with conjugate, or do you? Yeah,
I'll run longer than like 3-week blocks. Typically it'll typically be like 6 to 8 weeks for the variations before I swap them out, or if I have to swap them out a little earlier because of, tweaks happen or recovery or whatever it is, that'll happen. But I will run them a little bit longer. So, for squats, I use a lot of pause squats, a lot of high bar, a lot of 1 1/4, a lot of tempo, and kind of stick around in there. Bench press is a lot of Larson pressing, close grip, spoto press, and overloaded benches, or extra range of motion with like the Duffalo bar.
Yeah.
And then for deadlift, deficits, blocks, a lot of RDLs. I do a lot of RDLs. I'm really big into eccentric control of the deadlift, especially with my sumo lifters. I kind of get on their butts a little bit when they do those quick lockouts and then drop back down, right? And kind of just get a little sloppy that way. Instead, I try and make them control that eccentric down, and really build that stimulus in their hamstring and their glutes through the eccentric. It's something I really believe in. And when we look at like long-term athletic development, is having that eccentric control and not just collapsing from the top, but being able to take that weight that you just picked up concentrically and be able to go in reverse all the way back down to the floor with perfect control. And it really teaches lifters their position off the floor, the requisite amount of tension to crack the weight. It doesn't have to be a bouncy touch and go, but you can reverse all that momentum, hold it for a second and spring back up. And when I talk about mechanical efficiency, that's something I look for, is minimizing, especially on deadlift, that tremor, right? From coming down into the ground and back up again, because that's all stability through the low back. Right. And so that starts to get a little shady over a couple of really shaky reps versus really controlling and having mastery over the bar path and bar, I think provides a lot of long-term value for a lifter in building their deadlift up over the years.
Yeah, right at the start of the show, we talked about how it seems like, it's harder to develop the deadlift than the bench or the squat. And I had kind of always attributed that to the fact that there is less of an emphasis on the eccentric, and that you don't have the load in the deepest stretch, like in the squat, you're getting all of it in the bottom. In the bench, obviously your chest takes some of it off, but that's something you can coach out of people if you want to, like you don't have to smash your chest when you do bench press. But deadlift, you do get the concentric piece of it, but then most people just set it down, and I have a version of the deadlift that I really love. I call it the dreadlift.
The dreadlift.
Dreadlift.
Ooh.
So dreadlift is you get like 2 like of the horse stall mats or something to stand on.
Yeah.
And then you do your normal range of motion deadlift. You don't ever touch the ground. So you have to
I love that.
and then go back up. I usually have to set up like a bungee cord or something for my knuckles to hit, so when I know if I'm deep enough. But like, man, you do a few of those, you just feel like you've made terrible life choices, and
and like supporting the load in that bottom position, right? It's brutal. Yeah. And just keeping that tension on the body. It's amazing training stimulus.
The first thing it's going to teach you is how bad your position normally gets at the bottom of the deadlift, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
When you have to stop it, when it's not going to stop on its own, all of a sudden you realize, like, where the fuck am I? Like, I'm 15 degrees rotated over this bar right now. It's a bad time.
It's a good proprioception builder.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorite dreadlift.
I love that.
Yeah, it's not my favorite.
I like deficit pause snatch grip. Just, like, oh, you want to go up in max this week when you were supposed to be doing 4s at like moderate intensity. Okay, cool. So we're going to go do some pause snatch grip deficit. And now there's no way you're going to be able to go heavy. And I'm going to get mine.
Yeah. You just wait till they send them the video and they got you the video and they are going heavy and you're like, God damn it.
It's kind of, Those are fun people to train, right? The ones you really have to like keep an active grip on the reins, right, and make sure they don't overshoot. It's exciting the whole time.
Yeah. We do a little fundraiser every year, and a couple of years ago I was injured, and I don't remember what I couldn't do regular deadlift, so I was doing Zerker deadlift from the floor, and that was a day. That was a fun day.
Yeah, it's pretty
nuked.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah. So you mentioned doing overloads for the bench press. Tell us about overloads for the bench press.
Getting the feel for a heavy weight in your hands to me is a really beneficial component of the overload bench. And I started out just your basic slingshot. I never had a great like reverse band setup, so it would always be slingshot, board work, things like that for the overloads, or a pin press. But getting the feel for that weight in your hand, how it needs to come down to your chest, and then being able to overload those triceps at the top. For me in my bench press, I'm so powerful through my pecs that I'm always going to miss that last 3/4 of the way up and in my tricep. And so being able to hammer overload benches was really critical for me, being able to transfer through that last 1/4 inch sticking point, and being able to, I attempted 500 like 6 times before I got it in comp. And I remember it was the comp where I had hit a whole bunch of heavy slingshot work, and hit like a 550 slingshot that I was finally able to come in and smoke that 500. And I hit 512 that meet and just blew right past it. The heaviest overloads I've done on bench, I've done a single ply 765 to a 2-board. I've done a 785 bench daddy to the chest and back up, and then I've done 1,003 to a 3-board in a band shirt. I went over to Tri-Cities to train with Kennelly, and I come in that day and see everyone in the band shirts. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll give it a shot. This looks pretty fun. Yeah. A guy had literally just like snapped his forearm like 3 weeks earlier in it. And I was like, oh, I'll give it a shot. Okay. And I remember that day I took 800 and it just flew like nothing else. And that was kind of like my goal for the day. I was like, okay, well, let's see what 9 feels like, right? 9 didn't feel any different than 800. And so at that point I was like, okay, my best friend Nate trains over there, and I'd seen him try 1,000 in a shirt, and it just kind of like, it's one of those lifts you take out and it just bends you, right? It just immediately starts coming down. And so I kind of wanted to beat Nate at it. We have like a bench crown we go back and forth on for our lifts. And so I took out the 1,003 and it didn't immediately bend me. And I was so stoked, and I got down to the touch and nothing snapped. I was like, all right, here we go. And before I know it, I'm locked out. It kind of just, I couldn't believe how quickly time just stopped and then resumed afterwards. It was a really, really fun moment. And then I was too sore to really train for like 2 months.
All the way in the joint. You're like, why is it hurting?
Yeah. Your hands start swelling up like right afterwards. I was like, oh, that's new.
Yeah. Me and Logan were commiserating. I mean, Logan's a lot stronger than me, but we were commiserating a little bit about how like when you get really strong, like the bar, you start to feel like you're allergic to the bar because like your hands,
oh my gosh, yeah,
shoulders and everything is just like
feel it everywhere.
Yeah, your skin is just like, why are you putting 400 plus pounds on me again for the 50th time in a row today? Like I've had enough. I don't want it anymore.
That's why you have a callus there. Suck it up.
Yeah. So there's a lot of opportunity. Like you mentioned, quite a few options for overloads. Overload on the bench is a little harder, I think, than the squat or the deadlift, because squat or deadlift are really linear, right? They are pretty much move straight up and down. Bench press, most bench pressers have at least a like a meaningful horizontal movement, right? Because we start with the bar on our shoulder, bring it down to our chest. So you get that, And
I get a little, I'm a little picky with the way I coach descents down to the chest on bench press. If I have a lifter that's starting over the shoulder and then coming down in an arc, I find a lot of lifters rotate forward internally in the shoulder doing that.
Yeah.
And so I'll coach lifters to bring that bar just a little bit further out to where those lats really activate, their chest pulls up, and I'll try and get them to bring a straight line down and then push back towards that shoulder, kind of like a Nike swoosh thing.
Yeah. But it still makes it more challenging to
Very
overload,
much so.
right? Because like you mentioned, it's hard to find a good band setup because bands create a vector, right? So like if you're
Yes.
at a little bit of an angle, then the bands are going to be weird, right? They're not going to quite line up.
Yep.
Chains are a nice option because they'll
Yeah.
with you, right? So chains are good.
Yep.
What are your other favorite ones? Like you mentioned the shirts and the slingshots.
I like slingshots. I like boards.
Yeah.
I use one boards, like the little bench block. I think that's just a fantastic tool lifters can have inside their bag. I really like boards because it takes the pressure off the shoulder and the bottom.
Yeah.
And still lets you use it as an overload. Or if you're rehabbing something, right, and you just can't get down into the bottom, now you have a height progression. You can work your way down and still really hammer the triceps, get some higher repetition with heavier weight in there. So it's a great growth stimulus for the tricep that way as well. I also really love weight releasers for the bench press. I think when it comes to getting lifters from 4 to 500, a big sticking point for lifters is fighting the bar down.
Yeah.
And they end up taking up too much time and too much tension bringing the bar to their chest, or they bring it down quick and then bind up about an inch off the chest and then touch or dump.
Yeah.
And having the weight releaser there really teaches you to commit to that descent. And I try and give them like a tempo, something like 1, 2 touch, right? So it can be a nice smooth touch all the way down. And then once they get that release of the weight, we have a quality pause and they're really able to accelerate back up.
And then when do you use pin presses? So in the past I've really only used pin presses if like I want to do some overload, but I'm doing a lot of other volume. Like is that a good idea, or is there other times
I do love pin presses for volume. It's I'll put it at probably like 2 board height, or I'll start at 3 board and work my way down over like 4 or 5 weeks. So I'll do a range of motion progression as I add load and reps. But I right before my main meet last year, before I got into that training cycle, I did like a 495 for 5 pin press, and just the power and strength I felt after that for the whole training cycle, I thought was super valuable. And it doesn't beat you up the same way that going overloaded that way can with like a slingshot or a bench daddy.
Right.
Excuse me. When I notice when I go really heavy on the bench daddies, because it's like another 200 pounds over your 1 rep, that's something where I can't do it week after week after week. I can do it probably once every 4 weeks. And just so that's another thing to watch with your overloads too, is like if you're going to run a progress cycle of it, probably keep it short, 3-4 weeks at most before you pivot out, because you just get the benefit of the overload, right? And then go into a variation that's going to make you probably work a little bit harder with the range of motion.
Yeah, that's a pitfall that a lot of people fall into when they get into training, especially if it's like for sport. So if you're in like in the world of plyometric, depth drops are like, they're probably the biggest stimulus that you're going to get doing plyometric.
Totally.
But you also, if you're trying to do it like as a significant portion of your workout for more than like 4 weeks, 6 weeks or something.
Oh man, yeah, even then that's a lot.
Yeah, you're gonna start coming apart, and you're gonna be like, why does everything hurt, and why are my feet broken? And
I think that's where your progressions and regressions become really valuable, right? And maybe if you're going to work in depth drops for the first time, maybe don't start at your highest height and with load, right? And all these things. And like you can get more runway out of a movement the lighter you start and the easier you make it, and making that skill progress a little bit more each week, right? Starting with a lower box, then a little bit higher, then add some load, right? Then go a little bit higher and then add some load, and just try and see, and then check from there too, like especially with your depth drop, is your height after the landing and amortization phase, right? Is that height consistently improving, or is it starting to kind of like stall?
Yeah, I've seen some crazy stuff with people just telling fun stories. I heard a story about a guy who was doing depth drops and he was trying to continually overload them, and he'd gotten to the point where he was jumping off of like a 2nd-story balcony but onto a mat with knee wraps. And I was like, I don't know if you're doing what you want to do
Parkour.
You know, I was like, when you throw a high jump mat underneath of your feet and then you wear knee wraps, I'm like, I'm not sure that you're getting the juice out of the squeeze there that you think you are.
Just do it from a normal height.
Yeah,
without the other things.
Yeah.
Or do it onto like a trampoline.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna jump off something, you better jump up pretty freaking high, right?
Yeah, I think speaking of plyos, I always really like doing the overload stuff just on account of the fact that it made the weight feel better. Like when you took it out, it just did not feel as heavy or as scary. I've also gotten the same thing from just doing some kind of plyometric thing before, like as part of the warm up, do a plyometric piece as part of the setup. Is that something that you play around with at all?
Yeah, actually, I really love to use accessory work. And have it done prior to the compound lifts, especially like for lifters that are notoriously bad at warming up and kind of just jump into things and then start getting overuse injuries or just little aggravations in the tissues here and there, right? I like to provide, some unilateral movement in the lower body and upper body, maybe some sled work, right? And really just make sure that they're actually warmed up and tissues are ready to perform. And so kind of like, what I'll try and do is, it's easy to match like a box jump with a squat. When we train at my gym, what we'll do is everyone will get warmed up. We start working on their main lift of the day, and we'll work up to, let's say it's 4 triples, right? We'll hit that first triple. Cool. Now go do a round of your accessory work. So you have an active cool down or active break period, right? You're still recovering, but you're moving through and you're not training the muscles that are going to get worked in the compound movement. You're working other stuff. And then after they finish a round of accessories, come back, do another triple, another round of accessories, right? So we kind of get to work a little bit of work capacity, and my gym's set up so that supersetting is really simple and easy with all the equipment and everything. And I really enjoy the benefits of that, where you get improved work capacity. You're always warmed up for your lifts. Sometimes you're even doing your top sets a little pre-fatigued. And so you shed that fatigue, right? And you get into your meet prep, all of a sudden that strength really super compensates. And you have this awesome feeling that, okay, I've been busting my butt all through earlier prep. And now that volume's dropped off, I'm really reaping the benefits of it.
Yeah.
It also makes reaching those heavier weights more accessible to people that don't have 4 hours.
Yeah, totally.
Right. Because as you get strong, like we talked about, even at my level, like that squat workout starts to take a considerable amount of time. So you're just going to go to the gym and squat, or you're probably not going to hit as heavy a weights, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's kind of when you see power lifters lift, it's not only because they're lazy, right? Like, yes, do they?
No, it takes time.
Yeah, but you're not probably hitting that weight 60 seconds after, like, oh, coach said 60 seconds.
Yeah, no way.
Sweet, I can't go. Like, it's just not happening.
I always, I'll tell people to like listen to the song. Right? What song's playing right now? When the next song has finished, you should be starting.
Yeah.
Right? Because then you're probably going to get around 3 to 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah. I remember when I was a high school kid, I had a strength class, and our coach she was a very good coach, but I would work out like all day. So like I'd go in the morning and lift weights, and then I'd have the class, and then I'd work out after, and like I was always lifting weights. But I like to do, that class was right after lunch, and I like to do my heaviest stuff in that class. And one day all I had to do during the class period was we did a warm up together, which usually took like 20 minutes. And then I had an hour left, and it was just 5 sets of 4 with like 550 on deadlift or something. And I remember she came over and sat down next to me, and she was like, "Kids look up to you because you're so strong. I need you to work harder." And I was like, "I just did 550 pounds for 4, and I weigh $185. Like, how is that?
I'm working pretty hard."
Yeah. I'm like in between sets, I'm sitting there and like I can feel my heartbeat all the way in my whole nose, and like I'm dying, but it's just interesting the perception, around that.
You should have been just like, you pick it up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, she might have been able to do it.
Yeah, she
recognition. 3 more times.
Yeah, 3 more times. Yeah.
Pretty badass woman, but
yeah, she's awesome.
She just loved, like, she's definitely from the, like, she wanted high intensity, right? Like, circuit style.
Yeah, she's a fitness person. Yeah, which is fine. Yeah, it's great. It's probably really good. And honestly, like, if you're going to teach people to train, like, just in terms of, we talk about this a little bit, but just in terms of like, just I just want you to be healthy for the rest of your life. Like, I don't think that you really could have done any better, you know, like
not circuits.
You know, yeah. I mean, we definitely make some compromises. Like, the nice thing about powerlifting is that it's got community and it's a sport you can do forever and it keeps you in the weight room and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, if you really just were like, I just want to be the healthiest me, you'd probably have to roll some other stuff in with your powerlifting training.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's value in that for lifters as well, like especially post competition, and just like your body's beat up, you know, your stomach and your nerves are still a wreck and everything, and just spending some time, you know, not necessarily just super specific in powerlifting, right, but address some different, you know, movements, get some rotational work in there, right? A lot more than just moving in a straight line. Let's work laterally a little bit, and just kind of like, I don't ever think there's anything wrong with powerlifters being more athletic. It's just so incredibly helpful from an injury prevention standpoint, and just in not getting burnt out and still continuing to enjoy your training.
Yep. Do you often encourage people, like after they've hit a big meet, to just take, you know, 2 weeks or 6 weeks off and just have some time, and like maybe not off from exercise altogether, but like go play some basketball, you know, do a bodybuilding circuit, you know, like
not basketball. We're gonna break their freaking ankle and then I don't see them for another 4 months.
Okay, don't do it basketball. Okay, guys.
Yeah, I do. I'm never a fan of like doing multiple competitions unless they have to, right? It's, you know, your national level, world qualifiers, stuff like that. If you don't have to, or there's not money on the line, you know, I would much rather have twice a year competitions or once a year competitions for lifters, and really check off all the boxes in the off season to make sure that they're healthy again to go through a prep. I don't recommend people like take everything off the week after. Like, I think personally, if you can get back in the gym the week after a competition, right? Like maybe not Monday or Tuesday, right? But like by Wednesday or Thursday, roll back in, right? And get 2 or 3 days in after a comp. Like, that's going to help your recovery more than anything. It doesn't have to be hard. It just needs to be range of motion, right? And getting a good sweat. But I do notice, like, you have lifters that get right back into it after training, probably like 3-4 weeks post comp, they're fried.
Yeah, we had Spencer Arnold on earlier, who coaches weightlifters, and he was talking about how he was always like, let's get going again, start the next program. And then he had some people who were like, no, I'm going to take a break. And then they came back and then they were stronger than ever, like, you know, 6 weeks back after taking a 6-week break. And he was like, maybe it's not that big of a deal. Maybe
now
okay.
He's talking.
Yeah, maybe there's something to that.
After the Olympics, he like makes people take like months and months off. Like, go take up cycling.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back. And I was like,
it's not basketball.
Yeah, just not basketball. It's just different, right? Because we talked about this to him. They're on a 4-year cycle. You know, powerlifting, if you're at that level, like it's 1 year.
Yeah, and I guess there's always that point. Like, if you're new to the sport, this advice isn't really for you. Like, if you want to do 6 meets a year and you're brand new, you can probably get away with it and have a good time, see your friends and everything. But, you know, like, once you've got a little bit of capacity built, and you'll start to notice that post-meet recovery period is rough.
Yeah.
And that, you know, and going back to like 4-year training cycles, that's why I start to notice too with like my masters lifters is, you know, you're not talking about so much year to year progression, but like from year 1 to year 4 progression, you know, especially as like work demands start coming into, you know, people's lives, kids, everyone's responsibilities outside of the gym, like that starts to stretch, right? That progression timeline a little bit. And sometimes, you know, especially if you've been doing the sport for a decade plus, you know, just that time off. I remember when the pandemic happened and I didn't have anyone to train with. My gym shuttered, right? So it's just me going down to the gym, lifting by myself. You're only going to be able to push so far and do so much. And I think I took like 4 months off to learn shuffle dancing. And I got real good. And started to like feel like I had some fast twitch fibers, but I pivoted from that training cycle to my 2K total as soon as the gyms got right back opened again. I really believe it was that time off that I had to really make sure like I don't have any joint issues, you know, no tendonitis, no inflammation anywhere, and like my mobility was really good because I had lost some weight doing the shuffle dancing, and it just let me bulk and train and get ready for that 2K, and it ended up being, you know, the best meet of my life.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely a part of that last like 100 pounds at your level. It would be less at my level, but that isn't even necessarily strength. It's just skill.
Yes.
Right. So like you can continue to keep strength and have lower maxes for quite some time, and then reacquire the skill at a higher level. Like, so like it's hard though, right? Because we all like powerlifting. So what do you want to do when you go to the gym? If you want to fucking lift heavy.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
That's the exciting part about fucking.
That's the best part. That's the rush. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, you mentioned having kind of a undulating periodization, or, but let's talk a little bit about how you regulate your lifters. So before we got on, we talked a little bit about kind of like auto regulation strategies and using velocity tools. And, are you a big fan of auto regulation when you can use it, or do you prescribe most people percentages, or what's your?
I use percentages, RPE, and velocity all together. So if the lifter has access to a bar speed tracker, we're going to use that. And starting out, we're just going to record speed, right? And I'm just going to get a feel for what their velocity looks like at different intensity zones, different rep ranges, and kind of things like that before I'll start using it as like a cap for the day, right? And so we always start with a percentage base, and I use percentages really conservatively. I think that's something that I learned from 531 was that 90% training max and how useful that is. And so what I'll do is I still use lifters competition maxes when I do percentages, but it's conservative. If you think of taking 10% off of that, all right, so you're always a little bit 10% under. So if they're doing 90% triples, right, it's probably closer to 80, 85%. And so I give them a base with their session for the day. And I'll say, you can add weight if it feels good. And I give them a 7% cap that they can add to from there, which tends to be around 1.5, 2 RPE units,
right?
With where they could go up to, and it also like limits them for the day, right? So I can actually have progression the following week if they push too hard. So we'll always have a conservative percentage base, and then on top of that, they have a cap they can add up to, and then I will give them an RPE rating that I would like to see the lift performed at. Sometimes it's just a static 8, right? 4 triples at an 8. Other times it'll be, let's say, 4 triples, first set of 6, then a 7, 2 sets of an 8, right? And so I'll play with the RPE assignments within the set a little bit. And then on top of that, if I want to dial them in even more, okay, we're going to do 85% triples. I want that to feel like an 8, first couple sets an 8, last set a 9, and your cap, let's say it's squat for 85%, no slower than a 0.3. Right. And so if we can dial in all 3 of these variables, that gives the lifter a really accurate view of the kind of intent and intensity I want out of their session, and really helps guide them in. And so that's kind of what I try and use with my training prescriptions, is really give the lifter an idea of what I want from them using multiple measurements, right? So that they can get a well-rounded view of, okay, when I do a 9 RPE, it should be moving at about this speed. That way, a couple weeks later, if they're moving at that speed, that RPE 9 speed, but it's, 75%, we can tell right away, like, okay, you're fatigued, right? There's some recovery issues going on there. Maybe a deload's needed. Or we get back into that 90% range and we see their speed improve. Now they know immediately, like, oh, okay, it felt better than the last time, but now I see like actual facts, like it definitely moved better than the time prior. And I think the other great part about velocity especially is you can tell which reps in a set were misgrooved or not done well, right? Versus what the rep should be moving at. And so I think that's really valuable for the lifter as well, in terms of correcting themselves and seeing right away, like, oh, this rep was way slower. That was the one I skipped my pause or my butt lifted up, things like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You're almost using the velocity training as a way to like quantify the feelings that powerlifters have, like,
yes,
man, I'm feeling worse, but that's hard to, how do you express that? Like, oh, I feel fatigued. Whereas now you're using the velocity just as almost just like a tool for
feedback
that,
tool.
like a feedback tool, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Do you have a hard time? So I'm a big auto regulation guy. So like, you don't have to sell me, but the difficulty I've always had is in coaching people to understand what that actually feels like, what it actually means. You know, like I've had plenty of people who are like, that's a 10, that's all I could do. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have you go for a little walk. I'm gonna have you sit down for 5 minutes. We're gonna come back to this set, and rather than doing 7 reps, you're gonna do 18 because this is a warm up weight still. Like you aren't, that wasn't a 10, right? And you know, like those are some of my favorite moments in the weight room, because I think like everybody remembers that day that they were doing squats and they were pretty sure they were gonna die. You know, like
and then they kept going up.
Yeah, and then there was more. You know, you have more than you think.
Yes.
So
what a great lesson. Yeah.
I mean, that's like David Goggins talks about. You know, nobody gives 100% because if you gave 100%, you'd be dead.
You dead? Yeah.
But do you have is that a struggle at all ever? Do you feel like communicating with people?
Yeah, I think especially for like beginners that don't have a lot of context for RPE, I use RPE as like a strict labeling system. It's not reps in reserve, right? It's out of 10, how hard did that feel? Right. And so like, especially in person, I think it works better in person with new people. You know, they pull a weight. How did that feel on a scale of 1 to 10? Oh, a 7. Okay, so 7, let's go up a little bit. How did that feel? Oh, like a 9. Okay, well, let's hang out here for a little bit. And then you come back the next week, and they're beginners, so they progress, you know, pretty well in a week. And all of a sudden you can say, remember how this used to be 9, like just brutally difficult? Now you're calling it a 7. Well, that's a progression in strength. And like it immediately kind of clicks in their head, right? Like there's going to be days where things feel really light and you feel really strong, right? And those are days to push. And there's going to be days where you're just wrecked. And that's the point of that day, is just to get in, move around, punch your time card, and get out.
Yeah.
And I have a saying like, surf the wave, right? Ride the lightning, surf the wave. Like when it's there and that iron's hot, strike it. Right? If you feel ready to push, and you know, we have the time schedule in terms of competition and how far out we are, right? Like I expect you to get after it and push, and we can correct on the back end, you know, and adjust however we need to. But if you're feeling it that day, I want you to take advantage of that to, you know, to the most responsible degree. And that's why I have caps, you know, whether it's speed or percentage, right? But like it's pretty nice when you can string like 4 weeks in a row of like, here's the minimum, and they've added every single week, right? And you just know, like, awesome, they're in an awesome strength improvement growth phase, and you can really just keep riding that out. Okay, there's the cap for this, you know, block. Let's recycle back and give them time to recover and run it again.
Yeah, I really like the idea of having the 7% like addition cap on just for days that they do want to push, because I do run into that, especially when it's like early in the block and workouts are supposed to be kind of easy, right? Like that's the whole purpose of what we're doing right now. And then kids they'll just immediately like, oh, I feel great because it's a little bit of an easier percentage, so they'll just blow it out. And it's like, well, now we just kind of maxed. Like we're
what are we gonna do next week?
2 weeks into this fucking block, and you look at the next 2 times we're on the bench press, you're not even going to touch that weight. So like just follow it. But I like that with giving them.
And so like when I talk about having a heavy exposure and then either a rep or a positional exposure, the heavy exposures you can auto regulate. The other ones you're going to run as is and progress over that block, even if it's really light and easy at the beginning. Awesome. Cool. That means I can make a good jump next week and we can run it again. And I try and chain as much of that together as possible, where they're pushing those variations as well. And you get another 5-6 weeks of that. That probably matches out pretty close to where they're at with their heavy movement exposure, right? And so when you feel like that's kind of the trick, is like, okay, both of these end up going to be pretty high intensity at a certain point. Now, at that point, do you keep pushing the variations and let the the main effort drop down a little bit, or do you cycle them both down? And sometimes, you know, it's just going to be a judgment call based on how far out they are and what you're trying to do. But I think it's fun sometimes when they both start hitting even, if you can recycle back the heavy stuff and then keep pushing that variation another week or two and then reset it. I think there's a lot of fun in that for lifters, and just always feeling like there's something challenging for them in the week.
Yeah. The idea of having that, I mean, I just call it like the volume day, but is really, I find it really good for like the kids that, because at least for us, like the kids get in and they get heavy right away, right? And that's the hook for powerlifting, is like the ability to go. So they almost all go through like a strength block. But then they also, like Kyle said, they get addicted to the fact that anything over 5 reps is cardio. Yeah. So like pushing them through like a legitimate volume block, they're always shocked by, because, okay, like maybe I bench 225 and coach hasn't let me go above 175 on this volume block, but they're always shocked by like, holy shit, did that make me stronger? Like, because you're going to be bigger, like you're getting volumized, but also just the skill. That's a shit ton. If you only ever do 5-3-1, like that's not a lot of reps at whatever you're doing, right? Like, so just the skill acquisition of doing 50, 70 reps on a bench press, like that's a big deal. Don't skip volume days.
No,
you're going to look.
No, and I attribute a lot of that. You know, I grew up in my early powerlifting doing like Shako, right? And just the volume from that, I always attribute to my long-term success. Just because I got out of comfortable rep ranges. And I always find when I get stuck in comfortable rep ranges, that's when I start to plateau and stall. Yeah. And as soon as I start making myself do some 10s, some 8s, 5 weeks of 5s, that kind of thing, like, oh, there's the strength I've been wanting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how predictably doing the things that you're weak at will make you stronger. Right.
Yeah. It's crazy, right?
It is.
I think that's something too. Like I'm always harping on clients. Like you'll get people that'll be like, block pulls hurt my back. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, probably the way you're doing block pulls hurt your back. Rather than running away from that, it seems like that's a movement that if you got strong at, is probably going to be a pretty big carryover to your main lift. So don't run away from the hard things. That's telling you right there that like this is something you need to do. That's what you run towards and embrace is the hard stuff. Yeah. That's the sport, is lifting heavy weight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine that, having a stronger back, less back pain.
Who'd have thought it?
Crazy.
Who'd have thought it? Who'd have thought it?
I remember my back hurt so bad all the time growing up in high school. I remember boot camp in the Marine Corps. I threw my back out on the Crucible, and like that's our 20-mile hike day, and I'm just gutting through it. And I just, I had a brittle low back because my hamstrings were always so tight and just not strong. And as soon as I started learning how to deadlift, I never had back pain in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a remarkable thing. It's like we joke all the time that we should have a dummy up here that we can just point to and say like, oh, those are all the things that Kyle's torn. Yeah. But like, I don't have any pain. You know what I mean? Like in day-to-day life, I feel fine. Like, your body, like if you ask for strength, it'll give it to you. If you ask to not be in pain, it'll give it to you.
And that scar tissue is strong.
Strong.
That stuff's not going to tear again there. It's going to tear somewhere else.
I mean, I've done it a couple times, but
that's what I tell myself with my pecs, right? After a couple of pec tears, it's like, okay, no, it's really strong in there because of the scar tissue. It's not going to tear in that same spot.
Yeah. Right.
Just right next to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have, if somebody is just getting in the weight room right now, like, do you have any advice for like new lifters, like how we should have our frame of mind? I'm shocked over and over again how much mindset really matters in this. Like the people I see who just kind of natively make it are the people who, like you said earlier, they like to strain, they like the process. Do you have advice for people like this is how we should think about our training career to like stay in it for a long time?
Yeah, I think especially with like staying in it a long time, like find the things you enjoy in training and always make sure that's like a staple, right? Because that's when we look at research with exercise adherence, right? The number one predictor of exercise adherence is enjoyability. And people will not continue to exercise or engage in activity that they don't enjoy. And I think that's where you see a lot of times people sign up for 24-hour fitness or Planet Fitness or whatever, and they'll go and they'll hop on the machines, right? And they'll do they're lost, right? They don't really know what they're doing. What they're doing isn't particularly fun, right? What they're focused on is probably something like weight loss or getting in shape, which again is not fun.
Right.
Right. And so to me, if you can find something with training, whether it's a sport, whether it's a hobby or going to a local barbell club, if you can find something enjoyable, that's something that's going to serve you well for the rest of your life and something you're going to look forward to do. And then you're going to meet others in that community as well. And that's going to further reinforce that discipline, that consistency, and that motivation to continue to show up. And you keep showing up and you stay with it. And before you know it, like a year goes by and people will blow themselves away with the kind of progress you can make in a year, let alone a decade.
Yeah.
Right. And, it can be hard to look that far out, but I think that was something in college that my friends and I were really good at, just kind of setting long-term goals, right? It was like, we want the 2K total. We want to squat 800, bench 600, pull over 800, and just setting those lofty goals and just kind of like having a team of people that's working there with you. And now myself and Nate and Brandon, my best friends from college, we all have 2K totals. And we've all been able to do pro meets. We've all been able to lift with these incredible lifters over the years and learn from people. And you just don't know how far you can take something until you've really stuck with it for a while and just put the work in. And so don't get bogged down, and like, oh, I had a bad workout this week or diet wasn't really good or anything like that. You can always pick yourself back up and just start fresh. Like I think especially with beginners, they can be kind of hard on themselves. Oh, I didn't get any better this week, or, oh, my numbers went down or something like that. But yeah, but now you can jump on a box because before your ass never left the ground.
Right.
So that's, being able to find a win in the session and show them like your progression is much further than you think it is. And, it just constantly pointing out to them the ways they're improving, even if it's not load on the bar, is really valuable.
Yeah. I mean, like anytime any coach draws up like how you're going to get better, right? You draw this thing, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like going up and down. So if you zoom in at the wrong point, like
it could be way down.
Kids do it all the time. They're like, Coach, my bench went down 5 pounds. It's like, yeah.
Like, oh, 5 pounds?
Yeah.
Like
you also lost 30 pounds.
Lost 30 pounds, or it was like,
you're dehydrated, right? You didn't eat or sleep.
Break,
yeah.
Or you're not eating right. So it's just like, yeah, dude. Yeah. You know how many times my bench has gone down 5 pounds in my freaking career? Fucking every time it's gone up 5 pounds, it's come down 5 pounds. So,
I think that's a good thing to look at with like competition history too. People get bummed out if they do a meet and they don't PR, right? But look how close you are to PRing. Are you within 5% of your best lift ever? Well, that's a pretty good freaking meet still.
Yeah.
Right? That you got your performance that close, and maybe it was execution error, or people don't understand that, you realized you attempted like 30 pounds heavier than you've ever done before.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that if you weren't stronger than you were in your last competition. You just didn't get it. It's skill acquisition. We can do that.
That happens on max day. All my max went down, and I'll look, we're maxing like 60 kids at the same time, so I don't get to watch everybody. But it's like, well, your max was 320, and then you went for 315 this time, and then went 330. Like it might not have went down. It might be 325 now. We just can't take every weight, right?
Yeah.
You can't just go up by put the 2.5s on in every situation. Like sometimes
you start taking small jumps, like 320 is the same as 325 to your body, right? So you just spent it on 320. That's how it is.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious with doing the kind of conjugate or undulating periodization. Does your training look a lot different when you get, that 12 to 6 weeks out from a meet? Does it start to transform pretty radically still?
Yeah, I kind of have like a standard template in terms of what I'm looking for at 12 weeks out. About 12 weeks out, we're probably going to take either a heavy single or heavy double just to kind of see where we're at the start of this prep for the competition. 8 weeks out, I like to have them do a really heavy triple. 6 weeks out, I like them to do almost a max double, right? 5 weeks out, we'll deload. 4 weeks out, we'll reload back up. 3 weeks out, we'll hit singles, I say above a second and below a third, right? So we have good numbers to shoot for at the competition in 3 weeks. 2 weeks out will be opener or a little bit less. Week of, we're just going to go in, move around, hit some accessory work. If they have 24-hour weigh-ins, I try and have them train right after weigh-ins and eating so that they can put all that glycogen back in their muscles and get that recomp going, and then get after it on competition day.
Yeah. Peaking is always something that's really interesting to me. When I first started, the first few peaks I did, I tried to do like 12-week peaks, and I generally structure more like a linear block, style periodization. And so, but when I'd get to that first peak that I remember doing that was 12 weeks, I remember I made it to about like week 8, and all of a sudden, all that volume that I'd been doing in my linear block, like all that fitness was fading, right? And so I'm in there, and like my strength is starting to bobble, and I know that I'm running out of gas sooner, and I'm like, oh, this was too long for me. Like it was too long of a peak.
That's I worked with Josh Bryant for a little over a year this last year going into my last meeting. That was something I really took away from Josh. Josh was just in no rush to peak.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you need to train, keep moving, you're getting stronger, right? But you have to keep that volume, at a pretty relatively, moderate to high load way further than you think you do, right? And, at the same time, your strength will hold on way longer than you think it will. And so I think that's definitely something I see all the time when people go into their peaking blocks, is they push those first 4 to 6 weeks crazy hard. And then they get to those last 6 weeks, and it's kind of just trying to catch up recovery wise from what they had done before and hope their body holds up enough to be able to put together a good double or single, tell them what they can do on the platform.
Yeah.
And I think if you just can have some patience, right, and really build in some good reload, deload periods into that peak, you can still push volume, you can still be getting stronger and bigger, and really ride that a lot closer to competition. Then you get to those last 2 weeks and your recovery just surges through the roof, and you end up coming into meet day feeling a lot better.
Yeah. I'm so spacey today. I'm just dying. I feel like this has happened to me like the last 3 podcasts. Maybe I just need to get some sleep. Maybe I need to get a sleep apnea or something. Wife complains I'm snoring all the time.
Do you have a CPAP?
No, but I probably should have one.
Brother, yeah. Just pop onto that Craigslist and get yourself a loaner.
Go get one, borrow one. My brothers always tell me I got to get fired up on the CPAP.
It is the best sleep you can possibly get. I love that thing so much. I use it on my naps, during the day and everything, and it makes a world of difference.
I remember this on the podcast, but we talked about that of like it probably would just help just getting some oxygen, you know what I mean? Like, because I don't know that I have sleep apnea. It's probably definitely better that I lost the weight this year, but like just getting some more oxygen, like maybe we just during the podcast.
Yeah.
Just set up.
Yeah, just
blast it. The trick is nasal spray beforehand, then just jets straight up there, no blockages.
That's the sweet spot.
That's the good stuff.
Do you think I can do the full Darth Vader mask? Just covers the
I think you should.
face. Yeah.
Yeah. Would be great for the love life.
Oh yeah, you just put it on after.
You don't know.
Or it's the middle of the night and you just get to keep it on. You're like, yeah.
You're correct. I don't know. It might all I've always had a thing for Darth Vader.
Yeah, who hasn't? That's what I want to know. Who hasn't? Well,
might have been too much there.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I should
It's the deep voice.
Yeah. I mean, I think we might have done it.
That's
We're at
great.
an hour and a half. I'm running low on questions. I feel like
I think you're about to fall asleep.
Where can people find you at?
You can find me on Instagram at Dr. David Ops. It's Dave ATOPS. You can also find me on opsgym.com. We have a seminar July 26th at Spokane Fitness Center that our team is putting on for powerlifting. That registration and information's in my bio as well as on our website. And you can also find me on Reddit as Big Coach D.
Nice. Big Coach D. Have you been on the forums for like the last 10 years?
I'm one of the founding our powerlifting members. I've been going in a little bit more now. It took a couple years break, but I'm one of the moderators on there. It's people come in and out over the years. I remember, the first 5 years there, that's where I got a lot of my online clients to start with and just started building my business from there. And there's, a lot of great lifters that started out there that are now, kind of my age or 5 years younger and are really some quality, competent competitors.
That's so funny, man. Like I remember I haven't been on social media a lot the last 5 years or whatever, but
yeah,
I used to be on the Reddit powerlifting all the time. I remember reading Big Coach D's name every day. Every day. Big
I
Coach
think the
D's
weird
on
thing
there.
is
that's really funny.
I'm on Reddit as the Big D coach. Interesting that
we get crossed up on tags.
Yeah, often get your messages. It's weird. Oh,
I don't know. I'm not even on Reddit, so I guess I don't know. I got a
right.
one. Is there a third version of that? D Big Coach?
No,
it doesn't work.
Big Coach.
Big Coach. I'm not that big though.
No, you're.
Well, I'm big for a human, but not for this world.
On this camera, I'm bigger.
Not for this sport.
We always joke because Kyle.
There you go. Yeah, side profiling. Yeah.
We got the
Anybody that meets us is going to be so disappointed when they see
yeah
that I'm actually that big of a person.
One of my other coaches, Jeff, his Instagram name is not David Ops, because we've had happen a couple times where I haven't been at a competition, but Jeff's been there, and he's kind of like a shorter, bald guy with a beard, and then he's wearing all the ops gear too. So people, Dave. No.
Well, hang out for a minute, but for everybody else, thanks for being here. Like, comment, subscribe. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much. See you next time.